Hi everyone, welcome to my channel Indigo Chinese. I'm Frank. In this session, I'd like to give you a brief overview of the history of China. About 5,000 years ago, around the Yellow River Valley, China entered into an agricultural civilization. During this period, along with the development of farming, came the beginnings of architecture, the invention of a writing system and the calendar, and the discovery of medicine and metallurgy, among other things. In the first 1,000 years, the society was organized along clan lines. The leader of the clan was often held by the most virtuous and capable person. When leadership came to Yu, who was famed for his contribution to flood control, he had already chosen a successor, but after his death, his son killed the successor and seized the right to rule, and he passed the mantle of leader to his descendants. Thus, China entered a monarchical society with the very first dynasty named Xia, which lasted about 400 years. It is said that the last king of Xia Dynasty was tyrannical and he was overthrown by a vassal state, which led to the establishment of a new dynasty, Shang. After about 600 years, the Shang Dynasty was also destroyed because of the brutality of its last monarch. The civilization of the Shang Dynasty is an established one with clear archaeological records and evidence, with the discovery of many royal tombs and thousands of bronze, jade, ceramic artifacts, and oracle bone inscriptions. After Shang, a great dynasty was ushered in, the Zhou Dynasty, which is the longest dynasty in China's history and lasted about 800 years. The first king of the dynasty died shortly after establishing his kingdom. Great credit is given to his younger brother, the Duke of Zhou, Zhou Gongdan, who suppressed rebellions and assisted his nephew, the young king, to successfully manage the country. He preached that the society should be governed with morality and proper etiquette. He set the stage for a glorious era, which lasted 270 years until a king of Zhou himself ruined it. This king lit the beacon towers, which were used to raise military alarm and called troops from all the vassal states to assemble at the capital, only to play a trick on them to get his favorite concubine to laugh. Not long after, when real invaders arrived, he used the beacon again, but no one came to his rescue. As a result, the capital was attacked, and the king was killed. The crown prince was escorted away, and the capital had to be moved to the east. That's why the Zhou dynasty was divided into two stages, the Western Zhou, Xizhou, and the Eastern Zhou, Dongzhou. The Eastern Zhou period is further divided into two eras. The first 300 years are called the Spring and Autumn. During this era, 5 overlords rose successively as the power of the central court began to shrink. The 250 years following this are called the Warring States era. The central king of Zhou remained in name only, as vassal states continued to break away and claim independent power for themselves. In the end, 7 powerful kingdoms were formed. Despite the hardship of life during the Eastern Zhou period, it was an age of great intellectual flourishment. A large number of elites with lofty ideas emerged. Their philosophies are known as the 100 schools of thought. Among them, the most famous are Lao Tzu, the creator of Taoism, who advocated rule by inaction, which is to reduce control, to go with the flow, and to be as natural as possible. Kongzi, Confucius, whose dream was to rebuild the ideal society of the early Zhou dynasty and restore moral order. And Mozi, who preached equality for all mankind, universal love and peace. These schools fell in and out of favor with the rulers until one grew to be popular, the school of the legalists, who advocated for strict laws with clear rewards and punishments. The Qing state implemented the legalist approach successfully and thus became the most powerful of the 7 warring kingdoms. And finally, under the reign of King of Qing, Yingzheng, the 6 other powers were swept away and the whole land was unified in 221 BC. Yingzheng, rather than maintain the title of king, took on the title of emperor and is known as the first emperor of Qing, Qing Shi Huang. With his ascent came the age of empires in China as a unified and centralized country. Therefore, Qing was an epoch-making dynasty. Despite being an extremely short-lived one, lasting only 14 years, its many great reforms, such as a national road system, a uniform writing system, a standardized currency, and the unification of weights and measures, have had a huge and far-reaching impact on politics, economy, and culture, which continues to this day. The first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, also undertook massive projects such as connecting the walls of the northern border, which eventually led to the Great Wall of China, as well as a city-sized mausoleum for himself, guarded by the famous life-sized terracotta warriors. The end of the Qing Empire resulted in revolts. After a prolonged battle for the throne between 2 legendary leaders, Xiang Yu and Liu Bang, Liu Bang emerged victorious and established the Han Dynasty. Spanning over 4 centuries, the Han Dynasty is considered a golden age in Chinese history, and it has influenced the identity of the Chinese civilization ever since. Modern China's majority ethnic group refer to themselves as the Han people. The standard language and the written Chinese are referred to respectively as the Han language and Han characters. The Han Dynasty was a strong military and economic power and had a prosperous culture. It began to influence neighboring countries while also absorbing foreign cultures. Buddhism was introduced into China during the Han Dynasty and gradually became the main religion and philosophy. There was a brief interruption in the reign of Han, with the establishment of the Qing Dynasty, which lasted 14 years. As such, the Han Dynasty is divided into the Western Han period, Xi Han, and the Eastern Han period, Dong Han. The Qing Dynasty had one emperor, Wang Ma, having a bad reputation for usurping power. But a revised reading of his time suggests that he may have been a social reformer and a visionary. He abolished slavery and redistributed the land. He dreamed to build a more equal and perfect society. However, despite his noble aims, his policies were not well implemented and resulted in chaos, which led to his overthrow and restoration of the Han Dynasty. The end of the Eastern Han was an age of conflict, largely between 3 states, Wei, Shu, Wu, also known as the 3 Kingdoms period. Among them, the Wei state was the most powerful and finally claimed the emperor in 220 AD. Meanwhile, the Han Dynasty perished. However, Wei's imperial power was soon usurped by its military leaders, the Sima family, which established the Qing Dynasty and went on to unify the 3 kingdoms. Although China was unified in the first 50 years of the Qing Dynasty, which is the Western Qing, it experienced long years of battles, leaving the country weak and suffering from internal and external problems. After holding out for another 100 years, the Eastern Qing Dynasty fell and China entered the Southern and Northern Dynasties. Many states and regimes rose and fell. It was a period of ethnic integration in China. After about 170 years of division, The Sui kingdom accomplished the feat of reunification and established the Sui dynasty. Although it collapsed after only 2 generations, great contributions were made, such as the digging of the Grand Canal and the creation of the imperial examination system to enable public employment, which created a path for civilians to progress. The Sui dynasty paved the way for the more successful and longer-lasting dynasty that came after it, the Tang Dynasty. The Tang Empire is generally considered one of the high points in Chinese civilization and brought on a period of stability and prosperity. Credit for the establishment of the Tang Dynasty is mainly attributed to the second Emperor Tang Taizong Li Shiming. He is one of the greatest emperors in Chinese history. He was also recognized as Khan of Heaven and supported by the northern ethnic groups. The Tang Dynasty also saw unprecedented cultural and artistic prosperity. It is the greatest age for Chinese poetry, with nearly 50,000 Tang poems having survived to this day. The culture of Tang had a significant influence on neighboring countries, especially Japan. Today in Kyoto and Nara, you can see many historical sites where the architectural style was highly influenced by the Tang Dynasty. The only female emperor in Chinese history also occurred in the Tang Dynasty. Her name is Wu Zetian. Once a concubine of the second emperor, the great emperor Tang Taizong, she then became the empress of the third emperor, and finally she took the title of emperor herself. She managed the country very well, but since it was against the tradition for a woman to be emperor, opposition to her reign was never ending. Before she died, she handed imperial power back to Tang. Usually, every emperor would erect a stone tablet to record his great achievements, but she notably left a blank tablet known as the wordless stele and let the future speak for her. After prospering for about 140 years, the Tang Dynasty declined. The Anshi rebellion of provincial warlords shattered the empire, and it took another 150 years from the separation to the final demise. After the Tang Dynasty, China entered chaos again. Within 70 years, 5 dynasties alternated in northern China, while 10 states coexisted in the south. So this period is called the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms, of which the later Zhou, Houzhou in the north, had the strength to unify China. However, power was transferred to the military general Zhao Kuangying by his subordinates, who endorsed him by presenting him with the dragon yellow robe of the emperor in 960 AD. He went on to establish the Song Dynasty, which was again a prosperous period with a booming economy. Art and culture continued to develop, and there was even an emperor, Song Huizong, who was himself a top calligrapher, painter, and musician. But he was not a competent ruler, and his empire was constantly invaded by the northern nations, such as Liao and Qin. He was captured by the Qing kingdom, humiliated, and put to death. The capital of the Song dynasty had to move south to Hangzhou. This incident divided the Song dynasty into 2 periods, the Northern Song, 北宋, and the Southern Song, 南宋. The Southern Song coexisted with the regimes of various ethnic nations in the north until Genghis Khan Chengiz Han, the Mongols rose up and conquered all the nations. It was established by Kublai Khan Hubi as the Yuan dynasty in 1271 AD, with its capital located in today's Beijing. The whole China was ruled by an ethnic minority regime for the first time. The Yuan dynasty was a huge empire, and this period saw an international boom, as recorded by Marco Polo. Foreigners were welcomed, and the capital became quite cosmopolitan, as depicted in the opera Turandot. But during the Yuan dynasty, the Han nation, as the main ethnic group, had a low status. So there were continuous uprisings in various places. 90 years later, this huge empire was overthrown by the Han people, and the Ming Dynasty was established. In the early Ming Dynasty, its national strength was strong. In 1405 AD, the emperor sent grand naval fleets on exploratory and commercial missions to the Indian Ocean 7 times, reaching as far as Africa, decades earlier than the Great Navigation in the West. In the late Ming Dynasty, due to political corruption and financial exhaustion, it ultimately perished in numerous peasant uprisings. At the same time, ethnic Manchus in the north rose up and entered the Central Plains to seize control of Beijing. In 1644, the Qing Dynasty was established. Han people once again lost its power. The Qing Dynasty adopted a moderate policy towards the Han people. Therefore, the Qing Dynasty was relatively peaceful, with substantial population growth and a booming economy. Since the Opium War in 1840s, China successively endured many foreign intrusions and lost control of a few lands. The self-esteem of the Chinese nation suffered a huge defeat. In 1911, the revolution under the leadership of Dr. Sun Yat-sen, Sun Zhongshan, overthrew the Qing Dynasty and established the Republic of China. Thousands of years of imperial rule came to an end. However, the initial success of the revolution was marred by challenges from provincial warlords who controlled their own armies and began to clamor for power and territory. Along with this period of domestic unrest came the war with Japan, followed by a civil war between the Chinese Communist Party and the Nationalist Party, which ended with the victory of the Communist forces under Chairman Mao Zedong. In 1949, the People's Republic of China was established in Beijing. New China started a great economic reconstruction. Over the past 70 years, China has made tremendous progress and is today the second largest economy in the world. Well, that is the end of my personal overview of China's history. And finally, please enjoy an interesting short song, Song of the Dynasties.
商周秦汉，商周秦汉，隋唐宋，隋唐宋，元明清 Republic， 元明清 Republic， 毛泽东，毛泽东。